wish you could see everything that people up here get to see. As we look out, while Jeremy was leading, I looked up, and I'm not going to mention any names because it embarrassed the little boy, but he was up there leading, singing along with Jeremy. And that's a beautiful sight to see. That's our future song leader. So that's a great thing. And you also see some other things that aren't quite as comical or interesting. But we'll just leave that right there. And Brother Cates talks about the time that somebody started clipping their toenails during one of his sermons. I haven't seen that, so I hope I never do. The last 3 weeks, well, this being the third week, we've talked about 10 ways to help our children defeat Satan. And we talked in great detail about some of these, and we, of course, started by showing the great command in Deuteronomy chapter 6 of teaching your children when you wake up, when you walk about, when you go to sleep at night. Throughout the day, it's a daily thing to make sure that our children are headed on the right path. And we think about the psalm that children are an arrow, aim them in the right direction, and so on and so forth. And so we gave the top 10 ways to help our children defeat Satan. And we talked a lot about Satan is real. It's not a made-up creature. And it's a real fight. And it's not an accidental fight. You either consciously fight him or he'll win. It's something that we have to do. The good news is he can and will be defeated by those who truly fight him. And so we're giving 10 reasons, and we're giving 3 each week. Today we're going to go 4, but this will be the shortest of the 3. At least that's what I think right now. Number 1 was help guard their minds. Help guard their minds. That's one of the ways that Satan will attack the home. He comes in through different mediums. We can do our best to teach them the right things, but then through television, internet, or whatever, we want to help guard their minds. Number 2, institute quiet time. We talked about, a good idea, especially when they're young. Get them to say, go in there for just give me 1 minute, and I want you just to think about whatever it is that you assign them, something spiritual in nature, and just have them take some quiet time. Of course, as they get a little bit older, they can expand upon that and make it longer. But in other words, you're giving them a time away with nothing to do but just think. And that's an important thing in life from time to time, isn't it? If you ever just take time to meditate and to just think and don't have anything in your hands and just think for a little while. That would be great for a child to start that at an early age. Number 3, guard their schedules. Guard their schedules just as you would your own, not becoming so busy that you don't have time for the most important things. Guard their schedules. Not a thing wrong with sporting events. Not a thing wrong with them being involved in sports. But if that runs their life, if you're running them to and from, and that's what they do, go from one sport to the next in a daily basis, well, then it kind of cuts into the more important things. And then number 4, develop a warrior-like attitude. And we talked about how Nehemiah set the people in Nehemiah chapter 4, the fighters in front of their families. If anybody is going to come and get their family, they're going to have to go through the leader of that family first. So develop a warrior-like attitude. And then we talked about teaching one another to pray. Teaching one another to pray. Not only do we teach our children to pray, but they teach us to pray too. They at least remind us of what true prayer is. It's an honest, open-hearted talk with God. And children will remind you of that probably better than any of us adults. And that's a good reminder to have. So let them listen to you pray. They need to hear you pray, but also listen to their prayers. And that's where they tell you what's truly on their heart. And then teach them that their greatest achievement in life is service. Teach them that their greatest achievement in life is going to be a servant to other people. Teach your children to be servants. And that's a good way to start, is in the house. They just love this, having to serve their siblings. If a child can learn to serve their siblings, then they can probably serve anybody. That's a good place to start. And then, so new material from here on out. Number 7 this afternoon. Be strict enough. Be strict enough. Before I had children, I had it all figured out. And I knew what the perfect parents were, and I knew what they did, and I knew exactly how they did it. And if any parent at that time would have asked me how it should be done, you had your chance, because that's when I knew it all. If you'd have just asked me before I had children. I remember even having a conversation. Mindy, we are going to be disciplinarians. We're going to spank our children. We're not going to spare the rod. We're going to let them have it when they need it. And then God gave me 3 daughters. And I remember one time, I only did it once, sending one of our daughters to their mom to get a spanking because I just didn't want to do it. Be strict enough. Ephesians chapter 6 verse 4 is a very real and powerful passage. And to a young father, it's one that I had struggled with. And you fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. There's a line, a fine line between being overbearing and godly discipline. And of course, we all know that and would say that. But if we're on our children for every single little thing that they do, eventually we just become noise, right? And they're going to cut us off and stop paying attention. Be strict enough. Listen to this very carefully. It's a constant thing where we daily nurture our children, mold our children. But there is such thing of being too strict on them to where they will resent us. And not only that, could even resent God. Let me give you this idea. And I want you to think about this, because this hit me like a ton of bricks when I first heard this. Remember what I told you that first week? Some of this we got right. Some of these things you learn as you go. And some of these things from this lesson are things I wish somebody would have told me when I first had children or before we even had children. But here's the thing, and I'm going to scare you soon-to-be parents half to death with this. But you need to know this, and you need to think about it. Do you realize for the first few years of your child's life, everything that they think about God goes through you? In other words, let me think about it. How, with their mind and their understanding at that early age, how can they know anything else about God except that it comes from their parents? Not just things in the way that parents tell their children and teach their children, but also the way you exhibit God to your children is the way you treat them. So they equate that with their understanding of God. Well, what's God like? It's like my dad. It's like my mom. Now, they'll grow to understand God's nothing like my dad. God's nothing like my mother. He's so much better. But at those first few years in the nurturing process, everything that they know about God comes through you. Now, they'll go to Bible class. They'll go to school. But initially, I'm speaking, comes through you. Now, that's a responsibility, isn't it? But even though they gain understanding and they understand, no, God is better than you, He's bigger than you, He's so much more than you, even though they get, even in childhood, throughout childhood, what they understand about God will be what they see in you. Is God just looking for me to mess up so He can jump my case every time I do? With no patience, with no love in His voice, no tenderness in His heart? Is He just a hard being that's looking to hurt those when they're down without any instruction? Now, you and I know he's not like that. But to a child, when they have parents like that, they begin to equate that with how God must be. Now that is a responsibility. I told you, it's a responsibility. But here's the beautiful part of it, the beautiful part of it. You get to help them demonstrate the love of God to your children. And that's a beautiful thing. Be strict enough, guide them, but don't be so overbearing that they begin to despise that discipline. Number 8, be right with God and what works with your family, and don't let others steal your joy. Now listen to the very first way. I know that's a long point. Be right with God. That's the first part. You've got to be right with God. And what works in your family. And then, don't let other people steal your joy. This has been a challenge all the way back when we first started having children. And I'm sure when my parents had us, it was a challenge. But I think in the day of social media, this has to be one of the biggest challenges in the home. You be right with God. Make sure your home is right with God. That's been established. You be right with God and you do what works best in your home, and don't let other people steal your joy. Have you ever had somebody say this to you when you're talking about something you were doing with your children? Well, that's not the way we did it when I was raising children. How did that make you feel? What they were insinuating is, we're doing it right, you're doing it wrong. Why am I doing it wrong? Because you're not doing the way we did it. And it becomes this competition where you begin to feel inferior, and then you try to change what's right in your home to become more like them, and then you find out the way they're doing it wasn't the best at all. Now, I say that's always been a challenge, but in social media, everything everybody does shows their perfection. Just ask me. Just look at my Facebook post and you'll know I'm perfect. You know why? Because if I post, it's not going to be something dumb that I did. It's going to show something good that has happened. I try not to do this anyway with social media. This has nothing to do with the lesson. Is it wrong for me to brag and boast in person? Do this. Is it wrong for me to do it on social media? If not, why not? That has nothing to do with one or with the other. Where was I going with that? Oh yeah. You start comparing yourself to other families, to other parents. Let me tell you something. Things in their home aren't perfect either. It's not always that neat. The kids aren't always that well behaved. Things don't go always as perfectly as people display on there. Listen so carefully to this. Do what's right with God. Find out what works in your home. And don't let other people steal the joy that belongs in a home. You do what's right. And number 9. It's never too early. It's never too early. Again, and of course, Mindy would set me straight on this all the way back at the very beginning. You know, why in the world do we have cradle roll classes? Those kids have to sit in those special seats even to sit upright. And even then, you got to put stuff on each side of them so they don't fall over. You've seen it. Why in the world do you put kids that age in a Bible class? You know why? Because they can learn even at that age. You watch a child when he or she first goes to that Bible class, and then you watch after 1/4 the change in those children. The songs that they sing, the smiles that come to their faces, the movements they do when they start to sing, they recognize all of that stuff. And here's what I love. And parents, young parents, here it is again. This is almost grandfatherly. Not almost, not close enough for my liking. But I'm at that age where I could have been. I wanted with our children to them never to be able to remember a time that they were not consistently going to Bible class. And to me, and I know there's so much more to parenting than just sending your kid to Bible class. I get all of that. You've got to do it at the house. Of course you do. But what a thing as a parent, young parents, if your children can never remember a time when they did not. I'm not talking about occasionally when they get sick. I'm talking about periods of time where they were not in Bible class. What a thing to start and for them to carry out through all of their life. Starts in the home. It's never too early. And then last, it's never too late. It's never too late. You will be your child's parent until you're dead. And it's never too late to continue to use that relationship to try to teach your children. It's never too late. Grandparents, this goes for you as well. With your grandchildren, you're going to be able to deal with things with your grandchildren that their own parents can't do with them, because we take things differently from our grandparents than we do our own parents. So grandparents, listen up to this. It's never too late. I know in every congregation there are people whose children are unfaithful. And I know in every congregation that those parents tried to do everything as best as they possibly could. And then that child made a choice at some point, I'm calling them children, it could have been when they're 30s, 40s, whatever, to leave the Lord. Do we as parents, just because they're out of our house, put our hands up in the air and say, well, I tried? Or are we still their parents? Can we still try some things? And I know it's completely different than when they're in their home. And you have to be careful, and you have to try not to overthink things or underthink things. And I realize that this is a difficult point to try to get into even just one sermon, let alone of one point of one sermon. But what do? Number one, you always pray. And I know that you're doing this. Number two, your children still love you. Most likely, they still respect you, most likely. And they still probably do not want to disappoint you. When time is right, just let them know, I'm praying for you. I love you. I want what's best for you. And then do what you think is best in your situation. I can't stand up here and say this is exactly the formula. If you follow this, your child will come back to God. Can't do that. But never give up. Never give up. And I know that's a difficult point to do, but never give up. You know, in our culture, the United States, one of the most warped things, again, my opinion, is the idea that once our children leave our house, that our burden is done, our job is done. And I realized that children, when they leave the house, 18, I was my own man, ready to conquer the world again. Remember, I knew it all back then. Was ready to go out and all of this. And so I realized a lot of it's the way that the children are. And I realized some of it's the way the parents think. But in all the traveling that I've done around the world, you know what country it is? The only one I've been to, except for maybe New Zealand, where that attitude exists, right here. You know, in India, children in their 40s who have children of their own, they don't make major decisions without first talking to their parents. You know that? Now, they may not always have to do what their parents say, but they talk with them first. In Tanzania, they have this phrase that you see an older person, you say shikamo to them. In other words, I'm under your feet. I'm beneath you. I'm below you. I'm willing to listen to you. Your children are still your children. Don't give up. Pray. Look for opportunities. And then I want to close with this, because I mean this, and I know I speak for every elder here and so many other people. And here it is. If we can do anything to help you with your children who are grown and out of the house, or even if they're in the house, if there's something that we can do that you can't, and I say that because I know it's most difficult with family. I get that. But if there's something that we can do to help, please, please, please let us know. And we mean that. Isn't that right, elders? We mean that. Please let us know. It would be uncomfortable for us too. But you know what? They're not our family, so it's easier for us. These 10 things, last 4 that we discussed this afternoon. Be strict enough. Be right with God and what works with your family, and don't let others steal your joy. Realize it's never too early. As soon as those babies are healthy enough to be here, get them in Bible class. And it's never too late. Those who have unfaithful children, I know I didn't give you any answers, and really, except don't give up. Look for opportunities and let others help when we can. If you are not a child of God this afternoon, we encourage you to become one. Do you believe with all your heart that Jesus Christ is the Son of God? Are you willing to repent of your sins and confess your faith in Him and be baptized into Christ to have those sins washed away? Perhaps at one time you obeyed the gospel, but you haven't been living as you should, and you need to come home. Do that today. And let me say this, and then I promise we'll be done. Might be some listening online, and I know who might be unfaithful, what I mean. I know you need to do it for yourself to make sure that your life is right. But let me tell you, when you do respond and you do decide, I'm going to start living right again, you're not going to get anything but support for this group of people in this building. And I mean that. Come home. What's worse and harder than coming and having to admit that I did wrong and I need prayers for forgiveness? What's more difficult is not doing anything about it the rest of your life and having to face the Lord in Judgment Day. So whatever we can do to help, please let us know while together we stand and sing this song.
I bring my sins to thee, the sins